Elaine and Harry had a son, Greg, but that was only the very first leg. In 55, Mark began his life. Now there were 2 sons, a dad and his wife. Rich and Tim followed, Mom said no more. There was no way we can even the score. Home filled with music affected the boys. Now they make music rather than noise.
Mark grew in stature and grew in grace. He helped at home with a smile on his face. He loved to play golf, basketball too. He skied on water and he canoed.
Now he's in high school singing "Oh My" for Father Harry at Grand Rapids High. Then on to college, first Moorhead State, then on to Augsburg to find a date. Finally found Janice his senior year. She loved bananas, Mark loved his beer. The love that bit him sent her a clue. With it a love note on bananas about you.
Guinea to love, their time the knot. Mark a youth pastor, a scolding he got. Confessed to Janice what he had done. He had invited the whole church to come.
While at the San Mark show he was smart. He knew his Bible, could quote it by heart. Impressed his classmates, that struck a chord. And so they gave him the Bible award. He was ordained and answered the call to upstate Gilbert early that fall. He used a puppet, a colorful bird, for children's sermons to teach them the word.
Gilbert from Gilbert was the bird's name. He was a hit and brought Mark great fame. Then came the call that brought them to us. Mark, Janice, Stefan, and Gilbert a plus.
His daughter Ingrid grew up right here, taught her to fly fish, gave her the gear. One day outfished her, had a great day, and so she heard him, Sir Herding, to say, "Smell my hand, it smells like rainbow trout." Mark was a hunter, and every year he would go hunting in search of a deer. Gary would warn us, Mark has this flaw. He wants to kill Bambi, his mother and pa.
The good shepherd tends to his flock. Mark has been there for us round the clock. There for the good times, there for the bad. Caring for us when happy or sad.
Mark welcomes people entering the door, preaches great sermons, teaches the word. He's made good friendship, he sings like a dove. He takes us places to share God's love. Pastor Mark Aune, he's quite a guy. We're sad to lose him as he says goodbye. He served us well, that can't be denied. We're going to miss him, that is no lie.
He has been with us 32 years. It's been a great run.
We would like to take just a minute to introduce some special guests with us today. With Mark and Janice is their son, Stefan, and their daughter, Ingrid, and Mark's mother, Elaine Aune.
Also here with us today are Mark's brothers, Greg, Rich, and Tim, and their families, as well as Janice's sister, Judy Blomgren, and Janice's brother, Dale.
We also want to welcome former Augustana pastors, interns. There's Megan. Hi, Megan. Interns and staff who have worked alongside Mark and Janice these past 32 years, and representatives from the St. Paul area synod who have joined us for this special event. And thanks to everyone for being here today. We know that Mark and Janice would consider each of you a special guest.
Before we get to the big part of the program, we're going to take a walk down memory lane and just do a brief overview of Mark's life and how he got to Augustana. Mark Aune's journey began in his hometown of Grand Rapids, Minnesota. Mark and his family attended Zion Lutheran Church, where Mark was confirmed in spring of 1970. Mark then graduated from Grand Rapids High School in 1974, and then from Augsburg College in 1979. At Augsburg, three significant components of his life came together. He met Janice Blomgren, he sang in the choir, and he joined the Lutheran Youth Encounter team, New Vision. As part of New Vision, he spent 2 summers serving at Green Lake Bible Camp, and then in the winter between those 2 summers, he was part of New Vision's mission trip to Papua New Guinea and New Zealand. This is extremely significant to Mark's story, as it was during this time in the South Pacific that he realized his calling to ministry. After serving with New Vision, Mark was youth director at First Lutheran Church in Columbia Heights, and then enrolled in Luther Seminary in the fall of 1981. On June 5th, 1982, Mark and Janice were married. Mark and Janice then moved to Saginaw, Michigan, and Mark served as an intern for a year at Our Savior's Lutheran Church. In June of 1986, he was ordained. Mark was installed as pastor at First Lutheran Church in Gilbert, Minnesota in August of 1986. In August of 1989, he accepted a call as associate pastor right here at Augustana Lutheran Church. In June of 2002, he began his role as senior pastor for us. During his 32 years here at Augustana, Mark has baptized 725 individuals, confirmed 1,057 young adults, myself included, and I'm sure lots of you out there too. He's married 271 couples and has performed 446 funerals. In addition, we wouldn't be able to count the number of hospital visits, calls for pastoral care, and all of the special events that Mark has always been present at for us. Mark Aune has served us well here at Augustana.
We're going to introduce them together in their speaking order so introductions will not break up the flow. We are fortunate to have you here this morning to share special insights and relationships you have had with Mark over the years. Thanks for sharing your words with us. Leading off today is Beth Wilkie Porsche, a daughter of Augustana. Mark and Beth developed a special relationship as Beth was being called into the ministry with Mark's mentorship. Eric Kostru will be next, and then Ann Losman. Both Eric and Ann, who are members here at Augustana, I'd say would be considered confidants to Mark, as he often relied on them for advice, wisdom, and leadership counsel. And member Dan Halverson will be the final presenter. Dan and Mark have had a special, strong relationship since Mark's first day here at Augustana. Welcome back, Beth. The podium is yours.
Good morning. I was baptized at Augustana in April of 1969. So I was already in college when Pastor Aune was called here to Augustana. It was a decade later. It was a decade later, after you began here, that I called and I asked if we could meet. My marriage was ending, and so was the life that I had imagined. I didn't know you that well, Pastor Aune, but I had questions about faith and suffering and where God might be in the midst of that chaos. So we met. You listened as tears and questions intermingled. You prayed, and we decided that a service of healing may be something that I needed. So one night, along with my mom and my dad and my siblings, we gathered around that baptismal font in an empty sanctuary. I remember you wore your alb and stole, a reminder of the holiness of that moment. When I did not know what would come next in life, you spoke again of God's promise made to me in my baptism. We read scripture and we prayed. You blessed me in my grief, and you proclaimed a hope that I could not comprehend. Now, my life did not miraculously turn around the next day, and yet hearing again God's promise in the here and now and the yet to be created an opening for me to take a next step, trusting that I was not alone and that God would meet me on the path ahead. Now, I know there are thousands of stories like this one, where you have entered the shadows, the broken, the grieving of people and families here at Augustana. You dared to come close, to stir the waters of baptism, to extend bread and wine infused with God's grace, and to proclaim the divine presence within human pain, the incarnate love. When Gerhard Ferde died, a professor of Lutheran theology at Luther Seminary, someone asked, who will take on the scholarship now he's so solidly taught? The response? This theology will continue to be made known in the daily life of parish ministry. The scattering of seed, the patience in growth, the daily dying and rising. It's not glamorous work or resume building. It takes a piece of flesh to come close in the agony and the disorder of daily living. Yet it is the fertile soil of this life where miracles happen, where human and divine intermix, where a seed haphazardly is thrown and grows 100-fold. We are celebrating 32 years of your hands and your heart in the soil, Pastor Aune. Now our hopes and prayers for you, Pastor Aune and Janice, are the re-engagement with weekends. Go and make Saturday night plans. Just do it. Stay in your pajamas on Sunday mornings, but not forever. If the call to be a pastor includes collapsing and exhaustion after retirement, then the church has failed. You are still called, but in a different way. It's time now to fill your tank, to renew your hearts, to shape a new schedule and find a faith community for which to engage, not as pastor, but as parishioner. To see the view from the pew instead of the pulpit. To be among a community inside and out, to witness and advocate, to generously give to the needs that most break your heart. Because each of us is called to reveal the kingdom of God, to show up rather than ignore, to stir the waters of complacency, to tend and nurture daily growth, to follow Jesus. The world needs what you and Janet have to give, and we can't wait to hear about what's next, because it's going to be so good. I guess I could call you Mark, since I'm grown up now, and we are pastoral colleagues. But my greeting for you has always been Aune pastor in Swahili, reminiscent of the trip we and others from Augustana took to Tanzania in 2004. I call you Aune because you are my pastor. A call, a vocation that has shaped me and a whole community, the ripples of faith. And for you and for this, thanks be to God.
Good morning. When Scott Thorson called and asked me to do this, I asked him if there was anything particular he wanted me to talk about, and he said, yeah, just talk about Mark's 32 years here. And then he said, we'd like you to keep it to 3 to 5 minutes. Okay, so here goes. I'm grateful that God called Mark Aune to be a pastor. And I'm really grateful and joyful that he was called here to Augustana. So I want to talk about Mark for a moment and then return to that subject of Mark's call. So let's start with Mark's preaching. He is an excellent preacher. And I've been thinking in these last 3 weeks, what makes him an excellent preacher? And some things just sort of jump to mind. I think it's because his preaching reflects his faithfulness, his genuineness, and his curiosity.
Mark's faithfulness shows up because his preaching follows the gospel, courageously, with conviction, wherever it leads. That's not always easy. I'm sure there were some mornings where the gospel text wasn't exactly what Mark had on his mind, or might be difficult. But he followed. And I think, after listening to him now for as long as we've had the privilege of listening to Mark preach, we can confidently say that he has reflected and shown faithfulness in following that gospel in his preaching, wherever it takes him. His genuineness shows up in his willingness to share himself in his preaching. Sometimes in his questions or his humility, other times his joys and uncertainty. Other times his joys and certainty. I think this is really important. His preaching also reflects his genuine and deep knowledge of us. I've been thinking really hard about this, and I'm not going to do this justice, but this is the best I can do. I don't think Mark Aune really preaches to us or to us. I think he preaches among us, as one of us. And I am really grateful for that. I've had the privilege of being out in places where, with Mark, when people ask him about Augustana, and you should hear him talk about it. He lifts you up, he praises you, and he has your back. And I've just always been so impressed, not just with that, but the fact that he knows you, collectively and individually. And I think that really does show up in his preaching. He preaches among us. I think his curiosity shows up in unexpected places, and it always seems to catch me off guard. And here I'm thinking about one particular aspect of his preaching that shows up from time to time. One minute he's talking about the main participants in an account, the woman at the well. That's the one that came to my mind. And the next he's wondering why some seemingly minor player in the reading said or did something. Somebody I didn't notice. Somebody I never would have noticed. Or some aspect of the story that I would have paid no attention to. So I tried to find an example of that today, and I think I did, but I'm not positive about this. You're going to remember better than I do. But for some reason, the story from John and the woman at the well stood out to me. And in that story, Jesus and she interact at the well, and it's pretty obvious that she's lived a life that has made her not an upstanding member of that community. But she goes back into town, and all of a sudden she's convinced all these people to come out for Jesus. And I think when Mark preached that text, he asked that question, why do people follow her? She's not a prominent member of town, she's not the mayor. And I remember thinking, when I heard that, and when I hear things like that in Mark's preaching, yeah, I never would have thought of that. And yet, I learned so much from it. So when I say his curiosity shows up, that's one of the things I mean. Mark brings these same traits to his pastoral care. And I am especially grateful for that. Like so many of you, maybe all of you, I experienced a loss that was significant to me of a close friend and his family, his wife and 2 children, a little more than 20 years ago. Mark called a couple days after the news hit here. I don't know how he found out about it. I didn't tell him. But he called, and he asked how I was doing, and I told him I was pretty messed up, because I was pretty messed up. Among my ramblings, I don't know why, I mentioned as an aside that I was having these dreams that sort of showed up after this thing happened. And he interrupted me, and he said, tell me about it. I didn't tell him that I was having dreams so I could share them, and I was caught off guard that he asked. But I answered. And I cannot describe for you how powerfully restorative that conversation was. And in large part because he asked that question. Who thinks to ask that question? Mark Aune went there with me, as I'm sure he has gone there with you. And I am grateful for that. Very grateful. I'm also grateful, very grateful, that Mark invited all of us to know not just him, but his family. Think about this. Mark, Janice, Stefan, and Ingrid have been all in here for a long time. How many of us have a job like that? Right? Hey, I'm going to go to work and I'll see you, it's a Wednesday, right? I'm going to go to work and during Lent confirmation, and I'll see you there tonight, right? We're going to work on Sunday, and the whole family is all in basically all day. That just doesn't happen in anyone's job. And I am so grateful for that. I remember having the absolute privilege of serving as Stefan's mentor in confirmation and getting to know him in that process. And it was just a really wonderful privilege for me, and I grew in faith through that. I remember Stefan had this just wonderful blonde hair. I was always jealous of that. Sorry, dude. It's okay, you save money on that. Anyway, okay, so let's go back to the subject of Mark's call, because I think I'm getting 5 minutes here. I believe that I believe that God called Mark Aune to be a pastor. Who among us does not believe that God called Mark Aune to be a pastor? And I believe that he has answered that call. He has run the Augustana leg of that race well and faithfully. And my faith is strong. I think our faith is strong, because Mark Aune has been our pastor. And I am very grateful. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ann Losby, and I have been a member of Augustana for 27 years. I've served with Pastor Aune in the areas of stewardship, church council, building expansion, capital appeals, organ acquisition, strategic planning, personnel committee. I'm really honored to be here today and to celebrate Mark's and Janice's ministry here at Augustana. Bill and I met Pastor Aune the first day we entered Augustana with our 2 daughters who were attending church for the first time. Mark recognized us as new visitors, asked us our names, and greeted us warmly. We came back the next week, and Mark remembered our faces and our names. And he seemed pleasantly surprised to see us. We kept coming back because we felt welcome. And we stayed because of the worship experience, the exceptional music, and the children and family ministries. One of Mark's greatest gifts is how he makes people feel. He meets us where we are. Bill and I have been away from the church through our college, early marriage, and young family years. I entered Augustana with feelings of guilt and not being a good enough Christian. For Mark, we felt no judgment, no shaming, no better than. Mark teaches us that no matter where we are in our faith journey, we are all good enough. He treats all of us with appreciation, love, and caring. He's humble. When I asked Bill what stands out to him about his relationship with Mark, he said, Mark is approachable. He has a good sense of humor. I always thought of him as a good friend. Heaven only knows what kind of bonding experiences happen at those Augustana Beer Club board meetings. Mark values relationships. He genuinely loves sharing our happy times. Baptisms, first communions, confirmations, weddings. Mark made my daughters feel special about being baptized at ages 6 and 8. How many other children will remember their baptism, he said to them. Mark married our daughter Julia at our lake cabin. He and Janice traveled to Wisconsin to be part of our lives during this most meaningful and fun family celebration. Mark and Janice both came to our daughter's high school graduation parties. They didn't just pop in, they hung out and engaged with our family and friends. You guys missed a statistic. How many hundreds of graduation parties they have been to over all these years? How many, Mark?
I've lost count.
That is a demonstration of love, people. I have my fill out of 2 daughters of grandparents. Mark has also been with us during our challenging times as well. He's been with us when we were sick. Mark always made hospital visits and pastoral care a top priority. He has been at our sides during family tragedies. He's cried with us. He has counseled us through financial and marital challenges. Bill and I personally experienced Mark's wise marriage counseling in Tanzania, along with a few other couples, when Mark declared that the women and the men needed to be separated for the day, sending us off in different vehicles to experience a little away time from one another. Mark brings out the best in us. He has more faith in us than we have in ourselves. He asked us to serve in ways we didn't know we had in us. He expressed confidence in us and put his trust in us. He does not micromanage. We wanted to live up to his belief in us, and we did not disappoint. And we were encouraged to do more by his sincere expression of gratitude. Like many of you, I would not have done half the things I did for Augustana if Mark had not personally asked me for help and believed in my gifts. Mark has been an inspiration to all of us to be ridiculously generous. Time and time again, we have surprised ourselves with what happens when we listen with our hearts and respond with our faith. Mark has always believed in what we are capable of. For me, the most powerful thing about Mark's leadership style is that it has never been about him. His actions and words have always encouraged us to keep the main thing the main thing. Mark knows he is not the one in charge, but rather Mark has been our caring shepherd, our servant leader, our loving friend. We are all better because of Mark's leadership. Personally, as a faith community, and with our brothers and sisters across the world. Pastor Aune, we are all so grateful for your ministry of 32 years at Augustana. You will never know the depth and breadth of the positive impact that you have had in our lives and in the legacy of Augustana. Thank you, Mark, and thanks be to God.
So is this the same Mark Aune I know?
Just keep it short, Mr. Holmes.
Professor has assured me there's a trapdoor underneath here.
Hey, Dan, move the mic over this way.
Very good. How's that? Thank you. Okay, so we're singing hymn 504 in the back. Our group is in the back. And Mighty Fortress is what we were singing, one of our favorites. And I can swear I heard German next to my head, so I think Martin Luther is in the room today. And you'll see that as we go through this. There are certainly changes afoot on Robert Street. If you came up and down Robert Street today, you saw what's happening. And we've got changes here. We've got changes with the COVID-19. We're actually seeing faces now. This is probably the first lecture I've given in front of live people without a mask since March of 2020. So I'm going to take full advantage of that. If you Google search Mark Aune, and do that when you get home today, guess what you see first? You see probably over 100 Mark Aunes in the United States on Google. And I'm not sure where our Mark Aune is in that list. I couldn't find it. So I Googled Mark Richard Aune. Now you won't believe what shows up when Mark Richard Aune is Googled. It's the mugshot of Richard. So you go a little farther down, and it migrates from Mark Richard Aune, our Gusty, to another Gusty. Greg Aune shows up. With his dear wife, Julie. And there's a connection there. Julie and I are both Guantanamos. So think about that for a second. Anyway, it's interesting because I'm sure Tim was farther down the list. I just didn't find Tim yet. So, being the first time I've actually had a tie on since March of 2020, and the first time I'm in front of people, I'm going to possibly add 2 words to your word bank. 2 words. And it really epitomizes what I like to say in my next 2 minutes. The first word is proclivity. Proclivity. If that's in your word bank, tremendous. If it's not in your word bank, it just means a predisposition. Okay? The second word is certainly one of my favorites. It's alacrity. So, alacrity means cheerful, smart readiness, ready to teach theology. So, our Reverend Mark Aune, even though I'm hearing all these things about him, which I really can't believe all this stuff, Mark Aune has an unabashed proclivity for alacrity. Okay? So that's today's lesson. Okay, I got the green light. So, an unabashed proclivity for alacrity. I've seen the Reverend in so many different settings, you can't believe it. Okay, literally, Bible studies, confirmation, and every single time, proclivity for alacrity shows up. Okay, it could be in the scholarship committee, which Beth we have with your dad. It could be days where people have passed on. I can mention my parents, your parents. We've all experienced these things. Mark is just amazing. But again, if you want to go to Google, and maybe that's your assignment when you leave here today, look up Martin Luther and get down to what he was disguised as when he was at Wartburg Castle. He called himself Younger Georg. And I know the brothers will know this because the picture of Younger Georg was a disguise for Martin Luther and was a full beard, hair was all disheveled, and that's the Mark Aune I know. So we've got 2 favorite stories to share. First, singing in Kathy's choir, and that's with 2 Ks, Kathy's choir. Standing in the second bass section, guess what I'm standing behind every single time we sing in church? I'm standing behind a baritone named Reverend Mark Aune. And never once in our whole time singing has he ever complained about my pitchiness, which is pretty amazing. Actually pretty amazing for an Augie to an Ole. However, 3 times he has turned around. And he may remember those 3 times. I know Ken Fisser does because Ken's sitting right next to me and Mark turned around and he goes, Alverson, you're too loud. It's pianissimo. You're welcome. The other story is black ice. Now, for those of you who are Minnesotans, you know that this occurs probably once every 7 years. It's rather unusual, but it's really a meteorological event where the lake has been unfrozen and it quickly freezes at night and it's super smooth. If we have hockey players in the room, you know what we're talking about. And black ice is particularly good if you're passing the puck back and forth because the puck just glides forever. It's wonderful. So, believe it or not, in 32 years, Mark and I have never missed this special event in 32 years. So in 30 years, it happens about 4 times. But what's amazing about that event, he's always so gracious and courteous because sometimes the ice is probably, we might get out there a little bit earlier than our Department of Natural Resources wants us to. And the ice is probably only an inch or 2 thick. But he's always very gracious on those equations because he courteously looks at me as we both have our hockey sticks in our hands. And he says, Dan, why don't you skate about 20 feet in front of me?
So, now we're going to have a little bit of fun. I'll speed it up here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a quote from Martin Luther, and I'm going to see if we can check this quote off for our Reverend Aune. So we'll start with the first story on singing. Martin Luther said, quote, "Next to the Word of God, the noble art of music is the greatest treasure in the world." What would you all say? Has Mark achieved that? Let's say, check.
Check.
Next, let's do a couple more. Quote, Martin Luther. "He who loves not wine, women, and song remains a fool his whole life long." All together. Now, there is no more lovely, friendly, and charming relationship, communion, or company than a good marriage. Next one. Pray and let God worry. Another one. One learns more of Christ in being married and rearing children than in several lifetimes spent in a study in a monastery. Two more. I'm cruising. God does not need your good works, but neighbors do, and every neighbor does. Check. Next one. To be a Christian without prayer is no more possible than to be alive without breathing. Check. Okay, to bring this to conclusion, one of Mark's favorite verses is Ephesians 2, 8 through 9. "For it is by grace you've been saved through faith, and this is not from yourselves, it is from the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast." Martin Luther, and I feel him here right now. So, your calling, Mark, you're one of the very few people I know who has a calling both in teaching, theology, and pastoral care. And that's been covered very well by our speakers. And that's unusual, because in Ephesians 4:11 it says, "And he himself gave to some of his apostles, some became prophets, some became evangelists, and some became pastors, and some became teachers." You became both a teacher and a pastor, and pastoral care. So yes, for that hope and power and the promise, we live our lives fully with passion, bravery, energy, and alacrity. Remember our pastor, remember those two words. He does have unabashed proclivity for alacrity. Thank you, Mark, Janice, Ingrid, and Stephen.
Thank you, Beth, Eric, Ann, and Dan for your wonderful stories today. I too consider Mark a great mentor and friend, even if you've had to rein me in a few times over the years.
Now, on behalf of the congregation, we are excited to present gifts to Mark and Janice as just one token of our appreciation for what they have given us over your years of serving Augustana and its community. All gifts are from voluntary contributions.
The first gift to present today was also presented yesterday to Janice at her reception, and it is a very special oil painting done by our own Maxine Berg. We hope this piece of art will be a constant reminder of Augustana and Mark and Janice's home. The painting is out in the narthex on an easel. Definitely check it out before you head out.
Another piece of artwork is being created that will be placed in the narthex here at the church, a permanent reminder of Mark to last into the future of our Augustana community.
For our next gift, a brief backstory is important. Did you know that Mark and Janice have a cabin up north here in Minnesota?
Why? And maybe you've heard that in some sermons over the years.
Well, I've heard this cabin is on a lake and that there's not a boat. So we got you a pontoon. We thought this gift would be appropriate and appreciated by your entire family and hope that you'll be able to spend
Augustana, and also the boats that led you here 32 years ago. As you embark on the next life journey, we thought it might be nice for you and Janice to go back to where your call to become a minister became manifest. This congregational gift is a trip for you and Janice to New Zealand. Once again, so enjoy your travels in the time.
Hey Mark.
What?
Remember how much fun we had in Germany together?
I do.
You need a friend in New Zealand. Let me know. Mike, have you ever been to Arusha, Tanzania?
I have been to Arusha a couple of times.
What would you say is the fondest memory you have from your time in Tanzania?
There's no question here. I think visiting the women that are part of the Widow's Mite program. This is a ministry over in Arusha of helping widows generate income to support their families and themselves, which is just a remarkable program over there.
Our next gift is a generous gift in Janice's honor to support the Widow's Mite project in Arusha, Tanzania. We hope this gift will make a difference for their program.
Presented on behalf of the congregation is a significant contribution to Augustana's Harvest Fund in Mark and Janice's name. In the spirit of Mark's commitment to stewardship over the years, we thought that this gift is most appropriate. Mark and Janice will be asked to provide direction and input on the use of these Harvest Fund resources.
Just in case you need a recap of all that, we have the oil painting done by Maxine Bird, artwork for the Narthex, a trip to New Zealand, the Widow's Mite gift, the pontoon boat, and the donation to the Harvest Fund. Did I forget anything?
No, I think that's covered. Mark and Janice, on behalf of the congregation, these gifts represent our utmost appreciation and enduring gratitude. Mark, you have challenged us in a gentle yet clear manner. You have encouraged us with your calm and steady presence and leadership. And you have inspired us with your relatable teaching, including today's final message about faith and trusting in the promise. We will never forget you. We love you. Thank you.
We are going to invite Ingrid and Stefan up for some final comments before we hear from Mark and Janice.
Hi, I'm going first because as Mark Downey charmingly pointed out, I'm a bit of a crier. So we thought, if I go first, I can't make it through the stuff I can bring us to a crisp ending. The last time Stefan and I were up here together, we were 6 and 10, and we just come back from Tanzania, and Pastor Lanus decided to interview us about our time there. Stefan talked about culture, friends we had. I mostly talked about the animals and the 2 dogs we had, which was And what a wonderful place it was to grow up. The community has supported my brother in such an incredible way. We are both so grateful. We have been given so many opportunities as members of Augustana, from living in Tanzania to participating, eventually teaching at music camp, PBS, and performing and sharing a lot of music together. Being a PK, or a pastor's kid, can be a wonderful thing at times, and also pretty interesting. However, we've always felt an outpouring of warmth and encouragement from Augustana. For that, I want to say thank you from both of us. It was such a gift to grow up supported by the Augustana community and to grow up with Pastor Aune as a dad. Stefan will elaborate on what an extraordinary pastor and person he is, because I clearly am not able to get through it. But I will say that I will miss the quick "Hi, Indy" I got when I would come up for communion on Sunday, and seeing him smiling at my weeping during the final verse of Silent Night on Christmas Eve. Thank you, Augustana. Thank you, Paula.
So I'm really thankful to be here today. I get to see my family for the first time in about a year and a half. I get to see a lot of old friends and celebrate my dad and my mom. So after echoing everything that the sister just said, I just want to share 3 thoughts about my dad and his relationship to both his family and the broader Augustana community. When I was growing up, I had at best a vague understanding of what it means to be a pastor at a church the size of Augustana. Dad was the guy up front on Sunday mornings. He shook everyone's hand out in the hallway, and he worked harder than most over the Christmas holidays. However, as I got older, I became more aware of what this job actually meant. And one of the catalyzing events for this realization was a mundane errand my dad and I took to a shop. At the store, we were helped by a person I'd never seen before, but who clearly knew my dad. There was an intensity to this interaction that impressed itself upon me. It was crystal clear that it meant a great deal for this person to interact with and help my father. And you don't expect to feel those sorts of emotions emanating from someone on a weekday night at a strip club in the suburbs. On our way home, I asked Dad who this salesperson was. And he revealed that he had officiated several funerals for close members of this person's family. And Dad explained that shepherding people through the grief that accompanies the loss of a relative forms an emotional bond that lingers long after loved ones are buried in the ground. And after this interaction, I understood a little bit better what it means to be a pastor. For more than 30 years, my dad has woven himself into the fabric of this community, forging a multitude of connections to people through his presence in their lives at moments both happy and sorrowful. He's been there to welcome new life into the world, and he's comforted people at the journey's end. For men in this congregation, Dad has been there for each significant milestone in their life, from baptism to First Communion to graduation, onward to careers, marriages, and families of their own. My father has also shared life's challenges with people in their darkest moments, offering solace from the trials everyone faces as they navigate a world that can seem hostile and unforgiving. Dad has been there, and the glittering threads of these moments, connecting him to so many, are visible throughout this community as well as inside today. And this leads me to the final thought I want to convey. For more than 32 years, Pastor Aune has shared so much of himself with more people than I could reasonably count. And understanding that, perhaps the best thing I could say about my dad is that he had still so much to give to me and the rest of my family. So thanks.
I'm going to get in the pulpit one last time. But Janice, you get to go first. Yes.
Okay, I'm going to be really brief. There's been lots of talking. And I did my talking yesterday at the brunch where women were. It was beautiful. Thank you for that yesterday. That meant so much to me. It was so good to see everybody. It blew me away. And we kind of all discovered, as we all prepared separately for that friendship was the theme. And we all came together without being together. Friendship was the theme. And so I want to thank all my friends here. I have more friends here at this church. And as I said yesterday, my mother told me I couldn't have friends in the church if I married a pastor. Thank you for that. And I love this church. We will miss you. I will miss worship. I want to thank the musicians, Chris, Deanne, Kathy, who allowed me once in a while to play that instrument. What a gift that was for me. I'm going to miss doing that. Anyway, I'm going to miss you all, and I'm going to let Mark speak for us.
Okay, I'm going to get in the pulpit. Yeah, just stay up here next to me, please. You've been next to me for 32 years here. Let's not stop now. So, I did prepare some remarks, but I'm going to just say one more thing as a pastor that I didn't mention in my sermon today. But this fall, when things gear up again here in September, you folks need to be about the business of inviting people to come back to church. Inviting them back into the sanctuary, to Sunday school, to confirmation, to the activities that are going on around here. I know it's going to be kind of a scary time for people this fall with the schools and everything else, but in order for Augustana to get off to a good start this fall and to keep doing what God is calling it to do, it's going to be up to you to make personal invitations to people, inviting them back to worship, back to what's going on here in Augustana. So would you do that for me, please? And one person is all it takes to invite one person back. And that might be the one thing that would help someone to reconnect to their faith, to a church community, or to something that you have no idea what they need. And what they need is the gospel. So make sure you attend to that. So I'm just going to go to my prepared remarks. It's very hard to imagine a day like today until it becomes real. And you have to live it, and you have to feel it, and you have to go through it. It's overwhelming, it's humbling, it's sad, and it's joyful all at the same time. I loved worship today. It was so much fun to see the sanctuary full and to hear you sing and to sing those hymns and to just be together. I can't tell you how meaningful that was for me today to be able to come together as Christian community. It is a privilege of being invited. Well, let me just back up one more thing. There is a tsunami of feelings in this process of saying goodbye and leaving a group of people and a church that I hold deeply in my heart. It's the privilege of being invited into deep and meaningful relationships because of occupying this office of pastor. It's one of the things I talk a lot about with my interns. I have walked on holy and sacred ground with you. I have witnessed firsthand over and over and over again the power of the gospel at work in your lives, in your pain, in your joy, and in the wonderful ministry that we've been doing together all these years. Thanks be to God for that gift. The Word became flesh and lived among us. Ministry is incarnational. The gospel is incarnational. It's about relationships, and we've done that. And it's been an unbelievable, joyful, and meaningful gift for me and Janice and our family all these years. Augustana is a remarkable church, and I never would have imagined being here for 32 years, but that was God's plan. And when Pastor Langus announced his retirement in 2002, my son Stefan announced, "I'm not leaving Augustana, Dad." If I have to, I will go live in Halverson's backyard in their treehouse. And that's exactly what he said. But I didn't know if I was going to be the senior pastor there or not. Thankfully, we didn't have to leave then. but we have to lead now. And it's time for new leadership here, remembering the very important promise that God is always doing a new thing in our lives and in our organizations and in our community. As you have heard me say over and over again, we are always moving from death to life as God's people, from Good Friday to Easter. That's the rhythm of our lives and our churches, and it works because God is in control and the power of the gospel is always bringing new life. That's what's so amazing about it. Pastor Linus said something when he retired that I've never forgotten. He said, Augustana's best days are ahead of it. And that was his prayer. I believe that's still true. And that will be my prayer as well. That the best days of what Augustana Lutheran Church will be are yet to come. I believe this to be true because of you, the body of Christ called Augustana Lutheran Church, that you will continue to do God's work out of this place. You will continue to love your neighbor out of this place. You will continue to love God because of how you are fed and nourished in this place. And that is the church at its very best, and that's what you will do. That's what you will keep doing. I was told to keep this short by all the women who are in charge of my life here, Augustana. And I'd like to do with some gratitude and thanks. Thank you to the planning committee, to everyone that was involved, for Janice's party yesterday and the planning team and the speeches for today's celebration. Very, very meaningful for me to hear your words and just to hear your words. Wow, it's overwhelming, and I'm so grateful that we could gather in person this morning and have a proper incarnation of the body. Thanks to an amazing staff. I can't say enough about the staff here. Pastoral colleagues, interns over all these years. It has been an amazing privilege and joy to work with the staff here at Augustana. And I have to give a special shout out to my friend Gary Lane, who's my partner for 12 years here, and who shared ministry, who shared Tanzania, friendship, and also inappropriate humor with me. You know, when you saw us up here chuckling or talking, it was usually inappropriate. And it was usually his fault. So with the staff, it truly is a team effort around here, and that's what makes this congregation so great. Every person, and I mean every person on staff, is a minister of the gospel. Yes. Gifted, passionate, strong-willed, and creative people. I love you all, staff. Thank you for making me a better person and a better pastor. Thank you to our church council presidents and all the people that give such wonderful oversight and leadership and hard work to make Augustana what it is. You know, Eric and Ann are just a couple of examples of lots and lots of people around here that have helped me and guided me and shepherded me in this congregation, because that's what you need in order to have a great church. There are too many to name in terms of all those folks, but every staff person will tell you that when you need someone to step up and lead and serve here, there is always someone, and often many more who say, I'd be happy to help and serve. What can I do? I'm grateful for dear seminary friends, Dan Carr Erasmus, Rob Gold, and Joel and Sarah Quee, who have shared in this journey of ministry from our fun seminary days. Yes, we did drink some beer when we were there. Until now, these are couples that we have close relationships with, and they have been more important to me and Janice than they will ever know. I'm thankful for Janice's family, for wonderful parents who were thrilled to have us in the cities, and just as thrilled to know that we were at a church like Augustana. They modeled, her parents modeled what deep and committed faith looks like. And Janice's sister Judy and her brother Dale and his wife Cindy and their children, they do the same thing. And they've been a source of strength for us as well. I'm thankful for my 3 brothers and their spouses and their children. They, my brothers, can be merciless at times. They still remind me of some of my faux pas up in Gilbert. But it's always out of love And it's an amazing gift to have three brothers as talented and gifted as they are, and who are such great friends. And singing with them today was just such a gift. Mom, you and Dad did all right. I'm getting close here. Thanks to my parents who taught us all the importance of what it means to show up. Week after week, month after month, year after year, to just do your job and to treat people with grace and kindness. It's really all it takes. Mom, I'm so grateful that you are here today to see why we have stayed in this church all these years and what kind of a community it is. We love you so much. Thank you for being such a wonderful mom. And a pretty good composer, too. Ingrid's leaking up here in the front. Augustine is the only church they've ever known. And how wonderful is that? They were introduced to Jesus here. They learned about the global church here. They saw how faith is lived out in a healthy, vibrant congregation. And they were loved here. Loved and mentored by an amazing group of people here at Augustine Lutheran Church that have had a huge impact on their lives. And they've turned out beautifully. And I'm so proud of that and the way you're living your lives. And finally to Janice, my beloved partner and friend. She truly was the gift of God for me back in my knucklehead days of college. She saw enough there to hang in there with me. And you have shared in this odd and wondrous calling called parish ministry for 35 years. And not once, dear Janice, have you resented the strange hours, all the weekends and holidays of work, all the wedding receptions and open houses. And I just have to say, we were honored to go to those. It was never a burden or a problem when we had an invitation to go to an open house, a wedding reception, or anything else that we were invited to. And she always came with me. And it was a privilege to be in your homes in those occasions. We embraced all those things together as a couple, and we committed to sharing this life and community with Jesus and in the church. It truly has been a blessed gift to share it with you, honey. And I cannot imagine being a pastor alongside anyone but you. I love you so much, and I'm looking forward to what God has in store for us next, including going to New Zealand. As my children will tell you, I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan. And when Janice and Ingrid and Stefan and I went to see the Fellowship of the Ring for the first time, we were all sitting in the theater. And in the opening scene, when Hobbiton comes onto the screen, Ingrid and Stefan and I are singing, and tears are coming down our faces. And my wife looks down and says, "What is your problem?" I'm getting some instructions here. Yes, so what she's saying is we've been wanting to go back to New Zealand for, 35 years. Because that was the place. In December of 1979. We arrived in New Zealand 3 days before the embassy was overrun in Tehran. And it was fascinating. It was my first introduction to look at my home country while I was outside my home country and what was going on. And it was in New Zealand where God said to me, "I think you need to go to seminary." And I wrote Janice and said, "I'm going to go to seminary and I want to become a missionary." And she wrote back and said, "I'm going to start dating other people." That's an amazing, incredible gift, and my brothers and their wives are already throwing over the pontoon boat. But that will be put to wonderful use at a very special place that we share together as family, a place of respite and thanks. And you know, I thought I was going to cry more today, but mostly I'm just filled with so much joy and so much gratitude that that's all I can feel. And so I'd like to close